then I would at least hope that we come to the same conclusion that these were life-altering days of gathering. Man, just cannot be the same. Just cannot be the same. The extraordinary things that God did, touching people's lives in a real way, freedom, deliverance, joy, healing, just a sobriety that people left with even after the days of gathering were over. We're continuing to receive just countless testimonies of things that God did in people's hearts. I'm not talking about some emotional buzz, right? This is very different than what I'm talking about. As a matter of fact, that doesn't register anywhere in my heart as I'm even trying to communicate the things that I'm saying. I'm not talking about some emotional buzz, right? Some zing that lasts for like 2 days because you got to see your favorite person preach or, this kinds of stuff. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about something that's worldly, carnal, something that's driven by entertainment value or like our weird sense of satisfaction and the high that we get from like the event cycle that is so familiar to most. That's not at all what I'm talking about. But what I am talking about is, man, like God really did something. And we're fielding testimonies from people that God really did something. Like, man, people's hearts were impacted. People's lives experienced a pivot, if you will. There's been a change of trajectory in people's lives. People are still riding in with this wild sense of, man, God's presence, like the power of God's Spirit still resting on them in a real way. People still with tears, people still with real joy. This is what I mean. These are things that you can't manufacture. You can't come into a couple of days of gatherings and be like, this is going to be my takeaway. And then I'm going to somehow form it or fabricate it over a couple of days and then pretend like it's really living on the backside. No, that's not what I mean. But just a real extraordinary handful of days. Incredibly thankful for what God did as we rallied together. And incredibly thankful for the way that what happened over those days is now going to live. Because again, we're after something living longer than the meetings themselves. But something living longer than the meetings themselves. And now incredibly grateful for the people in that city, in that region, that are going to carry the word of the Lord, that are going to steward what God did over those days together as a beautiful people, as a bride, as the church in that city, in that region, contending for continued breakthrough and the furthering of God's kingdom and his purposes in our hour of history. Grateful. But so glad to be together today, and we're just going to hop right into it. There are several things, I guess, by way of announcement, coming out of worship, and then we'll jump into the scriptures, more so, I guess, in a conversational way, in a exhortive way, I guess you could say, to exhort you, to encourage you, more in a conversational format. If you have your Bible, we're once again, and I say once again because anybody who tracked with us during what was the quarantine season, the book of Daniel came alive to us in those days. And we spent week after week after week with Daniel preaching and prophesying and giving us a real posture to be a powerful people in the days that we were living. And I want to jump back into the book of Daniel again and just consider a few things for the days that we're living and how Daniel really provides amazing insight, amazing revelatory consideration. Daniel is almost preaching the days that you and I are living in right here, right now, today. Not just in Daniel's day. Yes, I get that. But Daniel's day is prophesying, and he is preaching to us in our day. And so we're going to look into the book of Daniel. And just, again, consider a few things more in a conversational format. We just got back from, I guess I could say it this way, some of the wildest and powerful gatherings possibly that I've ever been a part of, from this past weekend in Michigan. We were in Flint, Michigan, Mount Morris, Michigan, with Trinity Assembly of God. Nathan Morris came up and joined us over the weekend. It was days of gathering that were put together where I was doing the morning meetings and Nathan was doing the night meetings. And we experienced God together over these days. And I don't say that lightly. We've seen some extraordinary things. We've been a part of some real powerful, real dynamic. When I say wild, I'm not just saying like loose and casual and charismania and all the fluff and stuff that goes along with church life. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about, sister so-and-so showed up with her tambourine and that's why the meeting was wild. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about brother so-and-so who runs a lap, no. That's not what I mean. I'm talking about God really came in. Like God really came in and there was a sense of glory, weighty, tangible, overriding the agenda of the meeting. This is what I mean. In the days where the priests gathered and the glory cloud came in and they fell on their face and they couldn't keep the order of service. This is what I mean. Where we were looking one to another. What do we do? Looking one to another. What is the way forward? And there was no way forward because you should realize as well as the rest of us that our hearts burn for his presence, for his manifest presence, not just articulated presence, right? Not, well, God is here because we executed our order of service. Not like, well, that was an amazing gathering because, we did all of the songs in succession that we wanted to do. That's not what I mean. These things are far inferior to when God comes into the room. And no, there wasn't like a cloud. That's not why I say a cloud. There wasn't like a literal cloud manifested in the room. I say more so from us being put on our faces and from Jesus actually being the main attraction and him taking center stage and him beginning to guide the meeting, and him orchestrating and navigating the series of events that happened from that point forward. We plan for what you can't plan for. Or at least this should be the way that it is. Where when we're rallying together in hopes that he comes and he takes over the meeting. And so, my voice is really taxed. We prayed for hundreds and hundreds of people over the weekend. Hundreds and hundreds of people. And if you were in those meetings and you're on now, you understand. Man, we saw something this past weekend and it was extraordinary. And so we're going to jump into Daniel coming out of worship. But that's why my voice sounds the way that it is. I am feeling fine, right? For anybody who might think I'm lying and I'm just not feeling well, I am feeling fine. My voice is just shot because we went for it this weekend and it really was glorious. So we're going to jump into worship. And then coming out of that, again, just a handful of announcements to make. And then we will look into Daniel. We'll actually begin with Daniel chapter 6 and allow that to form our conversation. If you have your scriptures with you in some way. Jesus, we love you. And we understand that these are amazing days to be alive with all of the adversity and all of the complexities. Lord, you have called our name. For I knew you before I knit you together, before I formed you, before I placed you in your mother's womb, I knew you. And I had a plan for you. I had a destiny that would hover over your life, waiting for you to yield to me and to give me the yes that I was looking for. Lord, thank you that in these days you've called our name. We're here and we're alive to you. There's this beautiful fellowship that we know with your Son. And our lives are lived in and by the power of your Spirit. Thank you, Lord, that these are our days. And we realize that while the days are getting hot and hostile, while darkness seems to be on the increase, while wickedness and compromise seems to be celebrated, here we are. We're planted in cities and nations. We're representatives of you, King Jesus, and your soon coming kingdom. We have the accompaniment of signs, wonders, and miracles through the proclamation of the gospel. We're here to live for you and to bring the announcement to our generation that you desire. So here we are, Lord. We will go for you, as Isaiah declared. Who will go for us was the cry. Here I am, Lord, send me, was Isaiah's response. I pray that you would touch our lives in a real way, that you would radically transform us, that you would put fire and glory on our lives, and that we would live under the weighty hand of God. Like Moses cried out, if you don't go with us, there will be nothing to differentiate us from the other peoples of the earth. Lord, we need your presence, not just in a communicated theological way. We need your presence to touch us, to transform us, and to distinctly go with us, where it's you walking in the midst of us, like Paul said in 2 Corinthians 6:16, where it's you walking in the midst of us and calling us out and making us to be separate. We are different. Thank you, Lord, for a people whose hearts you are going to touch, that realize that in our day of history that we have been given, your presence is our only hope. Would you go with us, Lord? But would you touch us, radically change us, and wreck us for anything else? All of the crutches, all of the other vices and devices that we lean to and look on, all of the other human, fleshly, worldly resources that we've anchored our hope in. Would you touch us, Lord, and cause us to know in a greater way in this day our only resource and what should be our recourse is your presence and a powerful move of your Spirit. We need a move of God. We need a move of God. Lord, move powerfully by your Spirit. Move powerfully by your Spirit and touch us and wreck us for anything else. Touch us and wreck us for anything else. We need you. We need you, King Jesus. And I pray that you would accomplish this in our hearts. Accomplish this in our hearts. A people that would begin to look to you and depend on you. You are our only hope in this hour of history. Would you move, King Jesus? Pour out your Spirit, Lord.
We crown you now with many crowns. You reign victorious, high and lifted up, Jesus, Son of God, the darling of heaven, crucified. Worthy is the Lamb, worthy is the Lamb, worthy is the Lamb, worthy is the Lamb. So we say worthy is the Lamb who is seated on his throne. We crown you now with many crowns. You reign victorious. You are high and lifted up. Oh, Jesus, Son of God, the darling of heaven, crucified. Oh, worthy is the Lamb, worthy is the Lamb, so worthy, worthy is the Lamb. Oh, you are worthy is the Lamb. You're worthy, and worthy is the Lamb who is seated on his throne. Oh, you are. We crown you now with many crowns as you reign victorious. You are high and lifted up. Oh, Jesus, Son of God, you are the darling of heaven who was crucified. Worthy is the Lamb, worthy is the Lamb. You're worthy, worthy is the Lamb. Worthy is the Lamb, worthy is the Lamb, worthy is the Lamb. You're worthy, oh, you're worthy, worthy is the Lamb. He's worthy, oh, he's worthy, worthy is the Lamb. We crown you King of glory, worthy is the Lamb. Oh, we say, worthy is the Lamb who is seated on the throne. Oh, we crown you now with many crowns as you reign victorious. Victory is yours, high, high and lifted up. Jesus, Son of God, the darling of heaven, crucified. Worthy is the Lamb. He is worthy, oh, he's worthy. Oh, worthy is the Lamb. Sing praises to you, Lamb of God, you're worthy. We sing praises to you, Lamb of God, because you're worthy. Worthy is the Lamb, worthy is the Lamb, who's seated in your glory, you're seated in your glory. Worthy is the Lamb. I sing praises to your name, oh Lord, praises to your name, oh Lord, for your name is great and greatly to be praised. I sing praises to your name, oh Lord, praises to your name, oh Lord, for your name is great and greatly to be praised. We sing honor to your name, oh Lord, honor to your name, oh Lord, for your name is great and greatly to be praised. Oh, you are, we sing honor to your name, oh Lord, honor to your name, 'cause you're worthy, oh Lord, for your name is great and greatly to be praised. We give glory to your name, King Jesus, oh Lord, glory to your name, oh Lord, for your name is great and greatly to be praised. All glory and honor, we give glory to your name, oh Lord, glory to your name. There's no one like you, oh Lord, for your name is great and greatly to be praised. So we sing praises to your name, oh Lord, praises to your name, oh Lord, for sing praises to your name, oh Lord. Praises to your name. All the earth will sing its praise, for your name is great, and it's greatly to be praised. Oh, we sing praises to your name. Oh Lord, all praises to your name. It's due to your name. For your name is great, and it's greatly to be praised. Praise, all glory and honor. All praise, all glory and honor is due to your name. It's due to your name. Worthy is the Lamb. And all of the glory, it's yours, it's yours, it's yours. All of the glory, it's yours, it's yours, it's yours. All of the glory, it's yours, it's yours, it's yours. And all of the glory, it's yours, it's yours, it's yours. All of the glory, it's yours, it's yours, it's yours. All of the glory, it's yours, it's yours, it's yours. It's due to your name. It's due to your name. The name of Jesus is deserving of our worship. It's worthy of our praise. And all of the glory is yours, it's yours, it's yours. All of the glory is yours, it's yours, it's yours. All of the glory is yours, it's yours, it's yours. All of the glory. So day and night and day, let incense arise. Day and night and day, let incense arise. All the praise, day and night and day, let incense arise. Day and night and day, from the rising of the sun to the setting of the same. The name of Yahweh is to be praised. The name of Yahweh is to be praised. From the rising of the sun to the setting of the same. The name of Yahweh is to be praised. The name of Yahweh is to be praised. From the rising of the sun to the setting of the same. The name of Yahweh is to be praised. The name of Yahweh is to be praised, 'cause you're worthy of it all. Oh, you are worthy of it all. Oh, Jesus, you are. For from you are all things, you're creator, and to you are all things. You deserve the glory, all the praise, all the honor, all the glory. You are worthy of it all. Oh, you're worthy, yes, you're worthy. You are worthy of it all. From the rising of the sun to the setting, oh, Yahweh is to be praised. Oh, Yahweh is to be praised. Every creature, every living thing, praise the name of Jesus, 'cause you are worthy of it all. We give you what you deserve. You are worthy of it all. We give you what you deserve. For from you are all things, and to you are all things. You deserve the glory. Every creature, every living thing, proclaim Jesus as King. Every creature, every living thing will proclaim Jesus as King. Oh, every creature, every living thing, we will proclaim Jesus. You are the King, you are the King, and you're worthy, you're worthy, you're worthy, you are worthy of it all. You're worthy, you're worthy, you're worthy. Oh, you are worthy of it all. We give you everything, we give you everything, for from you are all things, and to you are all things. Oh, he deserves it, he deserves it. Endless worship, you deserve it. You are worthy of it all. From the rising of the sun, you are worthy of it all. To the setting of the same, oh, you will be praised, you will be praised. Oh, King Jesus, you will be praised. You will be praised. You're not just the Ancient of Days, no, you're still seated and alive today, and you're worthy, you're worthy, you're worthy, you're worthy of our praise, Jesus. So I exalt thee, I exalt thee, oh, I exalt thee, oh, yes, oh, I exalt thee. You can have my worship. I exalt thee, worthy one. I exalt thee, oh Lord, my God, Lord, my God, you're worthy of my praise, oh Lord, my God. You are worthy of my praise, oh Lord, my God. You are worthy of my praise, oh Lord, my God. You are worthy of my praise, oh Lord, my God. You are worthy of constant praise, of constant praise. You're so worthy. You're consistent to allow the sun to rise. You're consistent to allow the moon to rise. So why would we not be consistent in our worship? You're a faithful God. You're a faithful God. And you are worthy of our praise. I exalt thee. Yes, I exalt thee. Oh, I exalt thee. Oh, Lord. praises to your name, oh Lord, for your name's great. Sing praises to your name. Sing praises to your name, oh Lord.
All right, you can open up to Daniel chapter 6. As you are doing that, our registration for our upcoming Milwaukee Convocation, it has been open and it is still open. We are nearing very quickly what is going to be max capacity. And so I would offer and I would encourage that if you are prayerfully considering joining us in Milwaukee in just a couple of weeks, this is just a couple of weeks' time. I know that when we opened, I mentioned that we just now find ourselves having returned from Chicago, 2 weeks removed from almost 3 weeks. 2 weeks wouldn't be completely accurate. Almost 3 weeks removed from the convocation there in the Chicagoland area. We are just a handful of weeks away, October 7th, 8th, and 9th, there in the Pewaukee area, which is in the Milwaukee region, from our days of gathering and our convocation that is going to happen. You can register to join us. There's no cost. We have some incredible friends, powerful people, lovers of Jesus, men and women that are coming to contribute in a variety of ways, whether it be through worship or the word. Bob Gladstone is once again going to join us. He was with us in Chicago. He is going to join us in Milwaukee. Corey Russell is joining us. He was with us in Chicago. He is once again going to join us in Milwaukee. Scott Volk is joining us. This will be Scott's first time participating and coming to contribute in one of our convocations. We are so honored that Scott Volk is coming to join us, not as if to assume that we are not by the others, but I say that because I also mentioned that it will be Scott's first time contributing with us for a convocation. Billy Humphrey is joining us. I know that you are probably familiar with one or all of these names that I just referenced, whether it be Bob Gladstone, Corey Russell, Billy Humphrey, Scott Volk. Jason Upton is joining us in Milwaukee. Demetrius Stallings is joining us in Milwaukee. John Wilds is joining us in Milwaukee. Obviously, Anna and I will be there as well, alongside of our whole team. And then several others that are coming to contribute and run with us over those days and help in a variety of ways, whether it be through behind the scenes or in front of the scenes, times of intercession, worship, so on and so forth. We are setting up for another handful of days that are potentially, and not potentially as if to say maybe, but potentially by way of the expectation that is rising in our hearts, the real anticipation that we have that God is going to meet us as we rally together, that God is going to meet us in Milwaukee. And we're asking you to register, because that is the way that we are able to be responsible with the overall number of people that are going to be present. Again, there's no cost. You can register for free. You can go to burningones.org/conferences, and you can register right now. There is no cost associated with gathering. All you have to do is, if you're coming from somewhere that's not close, all you have to do is get yourself there. Whatever way you decide to get yourself there, whether it be planes, trains, or automobiles, all right? For those of us who may be a little older and realize where that is coming from, and that it's not just some cute little phrase in the moment that spontaneously got put together. Planes, trains, and automobiles, all right? So if you're coming by plane or train, bus, or what have you, that's all that you are accountable for. And then accommodation when you get there, unless you know somebody in the area that you can stay with. And if you do and they're not registered, then crash at their place and bring them too. But all you have to do is get there. All you have to do is get there. There's no registration fee. And again, like we say, what has now become regularly, it's not because it doesn't cost us anything in order to put these days together. It does. It costs us tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars in order to put these days of gathering together. But we are doing that, believing God that provision will be made for us so that we can provide these days of gathering at no expense to you. But that is not because there are no real expenses. I think at times people think that when you do something like this, that Delta has a supreme interest, that you are needing to get people together for a godly event, and so they're going to offer them flights for free. Or that Marriott or Hilton or one of these other venues is going to say, oh man, you're putting together days of gathering for Jesus and for the glory of God. We're going to give you just dozens and dozens of rooms that you can utilize at no cost. Everybody realizes that's not the way that it is. Right? And I say that in a comical way because it is comical to me at times how people think that behind the scenes there's no cost, there's no expense. Again, tens and tens of thousands of dollars. Man, and if God is speaking to you right now and you want to help us, and you have a way to be able to help us, then help us. I ask you that unashamedly and unapologetically, because I know that these days of gathering, we believe that they are a part of what God is doing, and that God is using these days of gathering to radically change people's lives. So if God is speaking to you right now and you're saying to yourself, man, this isn't free for you, even though you're making it free for me, I want to help you. I want to sow. I want to participate in a financial way. Maybe where you're sitting right now, the Lord would speak to you for you to cover the whole thing. And you would say, tell me how much it's going to cost in order to cover Milwaukee as a whole. Reach out to us. Send us a message. We'll tell you how much it's going to cost. Right? I'm not going to do that in just a general public way, but reach out to us and we'll give you that dollar amount. Again, tens and tens of thousands of dollars. We'll communicate that dollar amount to you. And no, I won't do that in just a general public way because you realize, right? Sometimes people just want the information, not so that they can become provision, but they want the information just because they're nosy, right? Like they're just nosy. They have no real desire to help. They have no real desire to contribute in any way. They're just nosy, right? I'll pray for you just so that you can send me the information, right? Because I'm nosy. I just want to know what's going on. I'm not really going to pray. I just want to know what's happening, right? With the nosy intercessor, right? We all know a nosy intercessor that's not really interceding. You're not really praying. You just want to be open to the information in whatever way it's going to be communicated. And if you're mad right now, it's because you're the nosy intercessor. You're that friend, right? I'll pray for you. I'm not really going to pray. I just want to have close enough proximity to where the information is accessible to me. All of that, right? Forget all of that. But man, if God is speaking to you and you want to help us, help us. It would be an incredible blessing. But there's no registration fee. You can go to burningones.org/conferences and you can register right now, whether for yourself or for a dozen of you, if there's a group of you that are wanting to come. And not that the limit is a dozen, We do have more space than that, but it is running out quickly. And it is going to be a wild and impactful handful of days of gathering. We are right now on day 2 of the 21 days that we are fasting and praying. This fast is not just a convocation thing. This fast is, I really want to give my yes to Jesus thing. This fast is I want to not necessarily draw closer to him as if to assume that he were distant. But fasting has become a beautiful way to inventory our lives, where the Spirit begins to sweep through our hearts and begins to take inventory of possibly the things that we allow, the things that we give our attention to, the things that consume our appetites. Yes, naturally, meaning by way of food and how we feed ourselves, but also the variety of other ways that we feed ourselves. Fasting becomes a beautiful way where the Spirit now has access to inventory our hearts and our lives. And the things that may be right now causing our hearts to wander, may be causing our hearts to be calloused, may be causing our emotions to be distant, may be causing our attention to be cluttered. The Spirit has a beautiful permission, if you would, in the place of fasting, to sweep over our lives and to begin to inventory all of what we are about beneath the surface. All of who we are beneath the surface of the images, the filters, the facades, all of the identity that we prop up. This is what I mean by the image, the identity that we prop up and the person that we present to other people as we would want them to believe we actually are. The Spirit has a beautiful permission to begin to brood over the places of the deep in our own lives and to inventory, and then to, through inventorying, confront us in order to bring us more subject to the rule of Jesus on the inside. We're day 2 of what is a 21-day fast, in how we are readying ourselves to lay hold of God himself and his agenda. We're after radical alignment, and this is what this fast is about. It's about radical alignment. Well, it's before Milwaukee, so you're readying yourself to gather for Milwaukee. We are, for those of us that are going to be gathering in Milwaukee. But there are dozens and hundreds of others that are joining in and participating that are not going to be present in Milwaukee. You see, you don't have to be headed to Milwaukee in order to want to be radically aligned to God. The two are not necessarily equal, nor do they have to be synonymous in the conversation. You can journey with us over 21 days of fasting. As I said, now we're on day 2. So if you began with us today, you would have 19 days left. But you could journey with us over the remaining days of fasting and praying, not because you have some special interest in Milwaukee, but because you have a special interest in God himself and his agenda in these days that he's given us to be alive. You see, I want to know at the end of my days, like Acts communicates about David, it says that David was a man who fulfilled the will of God in his lifetime. David was a man who was aligned to God's agenda in the days that God gave him to live. David was a man that had radical alignment to God and to his purposes in his hour of history. And if your heart is on fire to fulfill the will of God, then fast and pray with us. Fast and pray with us. I don't have a lot of secret tricks and gimmicks to offer. I don't have little tricks of the trade. We don't have rabbits that we pull out of hats. We don't have these things. We fast and pray. We fast and pray. Fasting and praying is our secret sauce. There you have it, folks. Fasting and praying is our secret sauce. And so this is our invitation. Fast and pray with us. Fast and pray with us. Because we want God to shake our hearts and we want God to shake our cities. Fast and pray with us. Here we are, Lord. Send us. But here we are, shake us. Then here we are, send us. Fasting is not just some external thing where we create a hit list and we want God to fulfill a bunch of agenda items on the outside of our lives that don't have some deep, intimate, real, powerful place to affect the inside of our lives. We want God to shake us so that we then can be used to shake everything around us. Fast and pray with us. We're on day 2 of a 21-day journey together into the heart of God so that we can be radically aligned to His agenda. Fast and pray with us. Fast and pray with us. We began yesterday, which was September 13th, and we are journeying all the way until October 3rd. 21 days. Join us. Join us. If you have Daniel chapter 6, I am just going to reference a few things that I feel like are going to be extraordinarily helpful for the days that we're living in. Life around us is becoming a circus. It's a circus. Not just from all of the fanfare and all of the hoopla and the nonsense, but there is a very real dark agenda that is permeating the global landscape. We understand, and I believe with all of my heart, as a matter of fact, I say this with all of my heart. I believe that we have entered into the beginning stages of the birth pangs that Jesus talked about. That would be the entry point or the crossing over of the threshold into what is going to be the infrastructure that is going to guide towards the end of the age. I believe that we've entered into the birth pangs. We've entered into the initial stages of the end of the age. And I don't say that in the same way because I understand that there's always going to be those who, when you read through the New Testament, you're going to say to yourself, people have been saying this ever since Jesus ascended. They have. People have been saying that we've been living in the last days. People have been saying that we've been leaning in closer and closer towards the end of the age. I understand that there are even a variety of places. Take the book of Thessalonians, for instance. In Thessalonians, that was one of the issues. They believed so heavily that Jesus could return at any point, including later on this afternoon, that many of them quit their jobs. Many of them were sitting around. They were idle. They were in a place of great anticipation. And so it had a different type of effect, right? And this is what Paul is writing to them. Tell them to get up and to work, right? So I understand, right, that there are complex situations. But friends, we should understand that there were certain trigger points. There were certain prophetic things that Jesus said to watch for. And you should, as well as I should, be very discerning in the season of life that we're living in. The sons of Issachar, 1 Chronicles 12, it says that they were able to discern times and seasons. But they also were able to acutely discern what to do in those times and seasons. You see, we need both in the hour of history that we're in. Because I honestly don't believe that you have a shot to survive without a prayer life in the days that we're living. Now hear what I'm saying. I'm not saying that you don't have a hope to stay alive. That's not what I'm saying at all. So please don't get it distorted that way. You don't have a shot at actually succeeding in the purposes of God, staying alive in God's agenda without a prayer life in the days that we're living. These are not days to try and delegate prayer as someone else's responsibility. You don't necessarily need to try and convince or command other people to be praying for you. You need a life of prayer. You need to know how to get a hold of God for yourself. All of your life needs to be moved by the voice of God. If you do not know what God is saying in these days, then you will find yourself subjected to the current of chaos right now that is saturating the world on a global landscape. There is a very real demonic agenda that is establishing a global infrastructure that is leading us into what the Bible calls the end of the age, where there will be a global unifying. There will be a demonic unity that brings all of the nations together into what we know Psalm 2 says, why do the nations rage? There will be a demonic sense of unity that will saturate the nations. And when it does, it will bring things together, nation and nation, on a global landscape. There will be a rallying together because of a demonic agenda. We will see it. There will be the establishing of a new world order, a global demonic unity. We are seeing it right now. We have to wake up to the days that we are living in. We are seeing glimpses. We are leaning in. The infrastructure is being set. The agenda has already been unleashed. And I know that there have been times in times past where this agenda has sought to establish itself in the day that we were living in, but it has not succeeded to the degree that we are right now seeing. Right now, we are seeing the agenda succeed. It is feeding on people's fears, and it is establishing a global infrastructure that is accelerating the end of the age scenario. And if you do not have a prayer life, you're not going to have a shot. You're going to be swallowed up by the current of chaos. You're going to find this agenda prevailing in your life. You're going to find yourself becoming subject. And what I mean by that is you are going to begin making moves based off of your own intellect, meaning your ability to try and reason out what is best for you. You are going to be subject, meaning your emotional instability, or the way that situations are going to toss you to and fro. And based out of an emotional condition, you are going to come to conclusions out of your intellect or out of your emotions. And anybody who has ever made decisions this way, you realize whether sooner or later, there have been moments where in a very real way, you say to yourself, man, that wasn't God. I did that. I made that move. I made that decision. And it was because I was afraid. I made that decision. And it was because I thought. It was because I reasoned. It was because I tried to evaluate everything. And that was what I thought was best in the moment. And this is where I believe Daniel has real help for us. Let's read Daniel 6 a little bit. In Daniel 6, we're going to pick it up in verse 10, right? We're not going to start with the first couple of verses. I have spent an extensive amount of time on this platform, meaning this way of connection, an extensive amount of time in the book of Daniel. And all of that can be found on our Burning Witnesses podcast. That's not some podcast plug. That's just to say there is a large amount of content that is found on our podcast coming out of the book of Daniel and the way that it came alive to us in the quarantine season, and how God spoke powerfully and prophetically to us in a way to posture ourselves in the days that were upon us. And so I'm not going to build out the frame, and that's the whole way that I say that. In Daniel chapter 6, verse 10, there has been a demonic conspiring against Daniel. Now, Daniel does not only represent a prophet or a person. Daniel represents a people. Daniel prophetically speaks to us of God's people at the end of the age. He is thriving underneath demonic tyranny. He is thriving when there is not a government structure that is favorable towards him as a believer in Yahweh. He is thriving with an accompaniment of signs, wonders, miracles, visitations, angelic messengers There's a prophetic sense of urgency. There is a wildly alive and on fire prayer life that Daniel has. Daniel is an intercessor. Daniel is committed to setting himself multiple times a day. He is in prayer. His prayer life is vibrant. He is in there. He is going for it. He is faithful in the place of prayer. Man, like angels are flying in the window when Daniel is praying, and they're bringing him interpretation of dreams. They're bringing him understanding to visions. Daniel's entire public life is being fueled by what is happening to him personally, privately, in the place of prayer. His secret place with God is giving him all of his instructions on how he is now to live out in a public place, interacting with the hostile series of events and circumstances that are unfolding around him. Daniel doesn't have it easy, but Daniel has a sense of ease because of the instructions that he's receiving from the secret place that is alive and on fire for him. He's actually connected to God, and God is guiding him through prayer. This is what I mean. If you do not have a prayer life, if you do not have a vibrant personal place of devotion where you actually know how to get a hold of God and you actually know how to wait on the Lord. My soul waits in silence for God alone, is what David says in Psalm 62. These are beautiful passages. And I'm waiting on God because he's my salvation. I'm waiting on God because he's my deliverance. I'm waiting on God because he is my rock. I'm waiting on God because he is my fortress. Like David, Daniel understood when all hell breaks loose, I have to retreat into God. And I have to wait until I know that I know what it is that God is saying. Because Daniel has a prayer life, Daniel understands how to posture his life. Do you see the connection? Without a prayer life, you will have no shot at discerning how to posture your life. If you actually think that in these days that we are living, you're just going to be able to deduce what the best way to move forward is by sifting through all of the different news channels and then hoping to be able to come to the best conclusion yourself based off of a mosaic of Fox and CNN and MSNBC, or maybe you have all of the underground outlets, or maybe you have all of your favorite people on social media. You will have no shot at powerfully posturing yourself to thrive in God's purpose in this hour of history. The voice of God has to mean everything to you in these days. Everything. There's not even going to be a close second. The voice of God personally and deeply in your own heart, providing the right governing and guidance to all of your life situations. There is no effective substitute for knowing how to get a hold of God for yourself. Well, Mike, I'm connected to some pretty powerful people. Praise God for you. But at the end of the day, the decisions that you are making for yourself, they are not going to be held accountable to. Our personal accountability is going to be anchored in our personal ability to get a hold of God and for him to speak to us personally and for then to be accountable to what it is that we know God is speaking. And because Daniel had a real prayer life, he knew how to posture his public life. But we're going to pick it up in verse 10. There's been a demonic conspiring They've been watching Daniel, and because of the life that Daniel lived, they could not shut down his personal devotion to God. They could not shut down his prayer life. They looked for other ways in order to make him subject to the agenda that they were driving throughout the culture. And they come to Nebuchadnezzar and they convince him, or to Darius, I'm sorry, Nebuchadnezzar is in the beginning. They come to Darius and they convince him to write into public policy. Listen to this. There is a public policy that gets instituted that no one can pray to any other god except what Darius has chosen. This sounds a lot to me like the situation at the end of the age, where there's going to be an allegiance that is associated with the mark of the beast. Right? I know there's a lot of talk about the mark of the beast and the vaccine and all of these things. There is going to be a demanded allegiance when the mark of the beast is unveiled, when it is unrolled, when it is pushed in the fullest way into our experience. In that moment of history, there will be an allegiance that is demanded, that is going to be directly associated, and it is going to be a form of worship. To worship, allegiance, these are going to be the defining markers of the mark of the beast. And so Darius writes a public policy. And he says, from this point forward, it's going to be a criminal act to pray to any other god. And when we pick it up in verse 10, this is Daniel's response to public policy that is not favorable to his personal devotion to God. What is now happening in public is affecting what Daniel is able to do in private. He cannot any longer live his personal hidden life in a way that is obedient or faithful to God without there now going to be a public consequence. And this is where we find it. And this is what it says. Now, that's now, when Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he entered his house and he continued kneeling on his knees 3 times a day, praying and giving thanks before his God, as he had been doing previously. And then these men came by agreement and found Daniel making petition and supplication before his God. Then they approached and spoke before the king about the king's injunction. An injunction is like an ordinance. It's like a policy. It's a changing of statutes. It's like a new regulation or a new mandate. It's like a new order that's been issued into culture. When Daniel caught word that there was a new mandate, when Daniel caught word that there was a new ordinance, when Daniel caught word that the highest seat in the kingdom, in the land, that the king had now issued this new ordinance, this new mandate, this new policy, this new injunction. When Daniel saw what was going on and it became very real to him, when he received the information, Daniel made a decision for himself. He said, I'm going home. I'm going into that Matthew 6 secret place, and I'm going to keep doing what it is that I've been doing. Now, let me say this. Daniel's decision was not the one that put him in the greatest or most favorable place for his self-preservation. Right? We can at least come to that conclusion. The law has been passed. If you do what we are telling you not to do, then there's going to be a consequence. So Daniel understands that the decision that he's coming to, there's going to be a consequence. Daniel understands there's going to be a penalty, there is going to be a price to pay. Well, if there's going to be a consequence, if there's going to be a penalty, if there's going to be a price to pay, why would that have been the conclusion that Daniel came to? That is a fantastic question. And we will answer it this way. I believe that Daniel knew the voice of God separate from his own personal interests. That God's voice had now not become associated with that personal interior voice that has all of its own self-interests. That everything that Daniel may have had as a self-interest was not now somehow automatically synonymous with God's interests. God's voice must be known outside of the association or the attachment to all of our other or all of our own personal interests. Mike, are you saying that all of my own interests at times might not necessarily be God's interests? That's exactly what I'm saying. That's not just speculative. That is exactly what I am saying. And I believe that Daniel knew the voice of God outside of all of his own personal interests. I believe that Daniel knew what it was that God was asking him for. And that's why he went home and he continued to pray. And I believe that Daniel understood that the only way that he would continue to know what it was that God was looking for him to do, the posture that he knew he was supposed to take, the way that he was supposed to faithfully live his life relationally. Relationally meaning relationally to others and relationally to the circumstances that were unfolding in his day. In a moment of circumstantial crisis, Daniel knew that the voice of God was the only hope that he had. The voice of God was the only shot that he had in order to continue to faithfully posture himself to live out what it was that was God's desire. And Daniel actually paid a price. He actually paid a price, right? We understand the story, man. Daniel 6 is when he gets thrown in the lion's den, right? We just read these verses. It says when Daniel knew, he went home and he kept on praying. Okay, well, that's the action that is going to give him the penalty. He went home and continued to pray. And it says that they evaluated, they watched, they surveyed his life as he kept on doing what it was that he knew if he did was going to bring on his life the penalty associated with the new order or mandate. And they watched him to see if he was actually going to be willing to cross that line. They set it up in order to trap him. It was a setup. There was an agenda associated with the order. The order was not issued in his best interest. Like, we have to wake up at a certain point. We have to understand that not every face and voice that says they have our best interest has our best interest. They set up the order being driven by an agenda. And the penalty was the trap that they set for him. And they watched him. And Daniel went home to pray. We know that. And because they watched him, they came, at least this is the implications of the way that it reads. They broke into his house. They snatched him out of his house. And they brought him to the king. And the king threw him in the lion's den. Right? So the idea is that how would Daniel, if he had a vibrant prayer life, if Daniel actually had a real connection to God, if Daniel was receiving all of his instructions privately on how he was supposed to live publicly, how would he have come to the conclusion that the decision that he was supposed to make is the one that seemed to put him in the place of the penalty rather than the instructions being to guide him in the place that would preserve him from the penalty? This is what I mean. If you are, I'll put my Bible down for a second. If you are supposedly receiving instructions that are always putting you in the place of self-preservation, I honestly don't know if you are all the time hearing from God the way you say you do. I just don't know if that can be truth. If all of your conclusions are being driven by self-interest, I don't know if you are hearing from God all the time the way that you think you are. Because if you do not know the voice of God apart from your own self-interest, then your assumption is that your own self-interest, that God is always going to rally alongside of what seems to, in an immediate or momentary way, be what has determined to be what's best for you. And what's best for you by way of human reasoning or even your emotional capacity to try and analyze circumstances as they're happening in real time. The assumption is that whatever is being driven by those things is always going to automatically mean that that's the way that God is driving. Not a chance. Not a chance. No chance. Jesus prays in the garden, I know that there are other ways. And Jesus, with loud cries, tears bleeding out of his face, cries out, let this cup pass from me. But at the end of the process of wrestling in prayer, he comes to the conclusion, not my will, but yours be done. His own self-interest as a man, he is wrestling with the pressure of the process and the penalty that he knows is associated with God's will that is driving him through an intimate, vibrant prayer life. And he is praying it out. And him praying it out is a process of wrestling because he knows what his Father is saying, and it is hard for him to swallow. This is what I mean. This is what I mean. To automatically just assume that because there are things I'm interested in, or there are penalties that I'm unwilling to actually process and have to pay, that there are a real cost associated with certain decisions, that couldn't be the decision that God is asking me to make. Where does this thought process even come from? It comes from self-interest. It comes from my own intellectual ability to try and evaluate the life circumstance from all of the situations that are going on. My own emotional capacity. Oh, well, I don't like the way that feels, so that can't be what God is saying. Oh, well, I don't like the direction that that's going, so that can't be what God is saying. Well, if I make that decision, then I'm going to lose out on this. That can't be what God is saying. I believe that Daniel knew the voice of God separate from his own self-interest. Separate from his own self-interest. I know that if I make this decision, there's going to be a cost. Only if you know that you have apprehended God's voice in a real private way. I mean, in a real private way. No. I know what God is saying. Right? These are days where our decisions that are being made must be fueled by I know what God is saying. These are not days to just hope for the best. These are not days to just throw darts blindly in the dark. These are not days to just try to let one rip and then figure out what happens on the backside of it. But at least in an immediate way, this is what made the most sense for me right here. These are not days to rely upon your own sense. These are days to deeply, intimately powerfully rely upon the voice of God and to allow God's voice to saturate your whole life and to override, where necessary, the intellectualism and the emotionalism that has overwhelmed so many people, causing them to come to conclusions at times that are outside of a confidence in being able to say, this is what God is saying. And not having to look at someone and say, well, this is what I hope God is saying because this is what I would want him to be saying. Because this is what makes the most sense for me. This is what feeds my sense of self-preservation. This is what keeps me in the safest place, the most comfortable place. This is what puts me in the place where I don't have to pay or I don't have to actually own up to a penalty or a cost associated with what God is saying. Daniel understood what the Lord was saying. And he went home and he kept on praying because he knew that that was the only way that he could keep on knowing what it was that God was saying. These are days where we have to be faithful in the place of prayer. And that our prayer life, it has to be robust. These are not days to minimize the place of prayer because you may feel like there are so many other things going on. You feel like your responsibilities have increased. You feel like your overall capacity to be able to, let's say, entertain all of these things that are happening in society, even on a global landscape. These are not days to bring a reduction to the secret place. These are not days to diminish or to minimize the secret place. These are days to go for it in private. These are days to increase. These are days to beef up. These are days to substantially and radically begin to develop our ability to intimately know God for ourselves in a way that is private and not anchored into someone else's influence. I do not need to know God through you. I need to know God for myself. That's what this means. And Daniel went home and he prayed. These are days to pray and to allow prayer to be our greatest resource. And I say that because there are so many other things that we feel we know to do, even successfully, to bring help or guidance or governance other than pray. There's a lot of tools. There's a lot of tricks. There's a lot of gimmicks. There's a lot of crutches. There's a lot of resources. There's a lot of vices. There's a lot of devices. There's a lot of structures, systems. There's a lot of information that's available to us in a variety of ways. There's just a lot that we can do, and there's a lot that in most cases we do separate from the place of prayer. Separate. I'm saying things that we do that are not even being informed by times in prayer. Things that we just get up and do, decisions we make, even in things that would consider to be very substantial. And this is what I'm saying. These are days where prayer must become our greatest resource. And the Lord is doing it. God is doing it. There are situations that are severing from our lives all of the crutches that we've walked with. And the pain, the penalties, all of the crises of the hour are ripping from us the crutches that we've known in seasons past. They are taking from us. In some cases, taking them from us. Meaning we are being pushed into painful places where prayer has now become our last resort. And then for others, we are recognizing the design of the season. And we are willingly and joyfully laying aside all of the other outlets and go-tos that we've known in previous seasons whenever the pressure wasn't really great enough in order to push me into the place of prayer like God really desired. Whenever, the crucible of circumstances, man, like it almost got me and it almost pushed me over the threshold where I actually had to begin praying. But, I found a way out right at the last hour. Right in the bottom of the ninth, resources came through, and I didn't actually have to get into prayer the way that God was wanting me to. Whoo! I dodged a bullet there. Our circumstances are now, they're beginning to, I guess as they say in these days, they're beginning to hit a little different. And they're actually pushing us over the threshold where we are beginning to realize the futility of our other resources. Hopefully, I hope to God that you are beginning to realize how hollow, how bankrupt, how empty a lot of these other resources that in previous seasons, they were able to keep the show alive. In previous seasons, we were able to keep the image or the exterior vibrant the way that we wanted to. I hope to God that in this season, the crucible of circumstances and the design of the pressure of the hour of the age that we are living in, that is serving the purpose of causing God's people to rise and to realize that prayer is not only a last-ditch effort. Prayer is not only an activity for the bottom of the ninth. Prayer is not only some rabbit that we pull out of a hat whenever all of our other tricks and gimmicks and games just can't seem to get the job done in the way that it's always done. Prayer is not a last recourse. But I'm praying that the design of the pressure of the hour of the age that we are living in will actually succeed according to its intentions, where what the enemy thought was going to kill you is actually going to drive you into the most vibrant season in God that you've ever known. Because historically, everything that's never been able to actually produce the life of devotion in you or to get prayer to rise on the inside of you, all of that historically might have never actually been able to get the job done. But here we are, now standing on a stage in the hour of history where the crucible of the circumstances, according to the demonic agenda that's been unveiled to create the infrastructure to lead us into a new world order, a global demonic conspiring and unifying of the nations. I hope to God that you begin to pray. I hope to God that you begin to pray. Let pressure push you to prayer. Let pain push you to pray. Let the price and the penalty associated with the circumstances that are being unleashed in culture through orders and mandates and injunctions and jurisdiction and governmental declarations. Let your faithfulness in secret, your private devotion to God, let it produce on the inside of you an actual strength and fortitude and bring in you a resolve to the most vibrant season you've ever known in God. At least this is what it should be doing. This is what it should be doing. And this is why prayer is not secondary. It's not peripheral. There is no effective substitute. You are not going to be able to delegate it to somebody else. Hey, go pray for me, and I'm going to reap the benefits of that. These are days where I must know that I know that I know God for myself, and I know that I know that I know what God is saying, not just subjectively because I've deduced that He wants what I want. No, because I have a vibrant, intimate, powerful life of devotion where I know Him and He knows me and He speaks to me and His voice is now what's bringing guidance to my life. I'm not looking to the CDC to bring guidance to my life. I'm looking to the voice of God to bring government and guidance. And my life is going to be subjected to the rule of King Jesus. And whatever King Jesus is saying is what I want my life to actually look like when I am living it. And this is where Daniel was. Daniel knew what government policy was, but he also knew what the king of his heart was saying. And these are days where we can't just assume that the two are always going to perfectly align. And this is what I'm saying. And the reason that I'm not talking about any particular circumstance, this one or that one, is because we have to know what God is saying to us. And then we have to live accordingly, meaning to be accountable to God's voice in my heart to guide me as I am living my life in a way where I long to honor Him above anything or everything. And at times, when that brings me up against a consequence, I have to know that I've heard from God, because hearing from God is going to provide me the grace in order to face the consequence. Hearing from God is what is going to give me the resolve and the fortitude in order to walk through a tough season, a tough moment, in order to not just be faced with a decision that has to be made, but in order to make the decision and then walk it through, and then grace in order to own the consequence, if it be that a consequence is what is associated with the decision. Daniel didn't just go home and pray once he knew what government policy was. He went home and prayed, and then they ripped him out of his house and brought him before the king and threw him in the lion's den. And yes, because we know the story, we know that God preserved him in the lion's den, but he still had to get in there. It's not like, oh, well, because I know the story, I can bypass the lion's den. Daniel made the decision that put him in the place of having to pay the price. And he faced the consequence, and he was processed. But as he was processed, God preserved him. Yes, in this instance, we have to know God's voice outside of our own self-interests. And if you don't, then you will assume that you'll assume a variety of things, as a matter of fact. You'll assume that what you always want is what God always wants. You'll assume that what you have determined is best for you. Again, this is just another way to say the same thing, that by your own evaluation, by your own intellectual ability to analyze or reason out a process, you will assume that that conclusion that you come to is always automatically going to be the same conclusion that God comes to, or you're going to suggest that whatever you emotionally feel, want, desire, have a liking towards, or prefer is going to be the same decision that God is going to make. This is absolute nonsense. It is absolute nonsense, right? And not even going to get into it. But this is what Paul suggests is the tyranny of the powers of the air in Ephesians chapter 2. The spirit at work in the sons of disobedience, governing over them, ruling over them, that they would overindulge in the lustful cravings of the mind and of the heart. Intellectualism, emotionalism. That doesn't mean we're all supposed to be ignorant. It means that we do not depend upon our own fleshly faculties to govern or rule our lives. We have God's Spirit. And the Holy Spirit on the inside gives us access to the mind of Christ. And through this access, we now know what it is that God is saying. Not just in certain seasons, we have the ability to know what God is saying in every season, and in a very real and powerful way, the voice of God and not the inspiration of the powers of the air or the inspiration of my own self-preservation, and how those two things seek to animate me and rule over me. We don't have to give in to that. We have God's Spirit, and God's Spirit is what we depend on. God, I need you to speak to me, because my mind is telling me to go this way. My heart is telling me to go that way. Man, the spirit of the age, the tyranny of the pressure of the powers of the air, they're longing to get me to align with their agenda. Lord, what are you saying? I have to be able to sort through all of that. First off, I have to actually know that that's happening, right? Because if I don't understand that that's actually happening, then I'll never have the consideration that it needs to be sorted through. So I have to sort through all of that. God, I have to know what you're saying. And I have to wrestle in the place of prayer long enough to where I know that those things have been conquered and that I pass that cup so that your will be done and not mine. Prayer in these days, and I believe that God is doing it. God is causing prayer to rise as the greatest resource in this season. And He is breaking the crutches. He is severing all of our historical tendencies to rely upon other resources, systems, people, little tricks of the trade, gimmicks. He's severing all of the tendency to want to look to and cling to all of these other things. God is doing it, and He is driving His people back into His presence. He is driving His people back into the place of prayer, where we are beginning to realize, I cannot survive without a vibrant connection to God. I can't. The crucible of the circumstances in this hour of history are forcing us to have to be the people that we all know and even at times suggest that we are. We suggest it externally, with at times realizing that we're not living in the greatest measure of it personally, internally. But the crucible of the hour is driving us to actually become what we all know we should have been all along. And God is doing it. God is doing it. And so let what is working actually work in you. Let what is working in culture, in life, in the systems, in all of the announcements, mandates, the evidence, the consequences, let what is working have its work in you. And let it drive us to where we should have been all along. To be a robust praying people. To be a powerful people in the place of prayer. To actually know what God is saying, and to let the word of the Lord give grace and issue strength for us to be out in public who it is that God is saying we are supposed to be in this hour of history. That's what Daniel did. Daniel took all of the information that was going on out here, and he let it drive him into the private, the secret, the personal place of connection that he had to God. And we should be doing the same. We shouldn't be processing all of the information out here and then responding to things out here based off of our own intellectual deductions or our own emotional preferences. That's not how we should be processing all of the things that are happening in life right now. Everything that's happening out here should be driving us into the secret place. And we should be laying it all out before God. And in great intimacy and desperation, we should be unwilling to move or to be moved until we know what it is that God is saying. I'm telling you, It's the only place that you are going to find grace to actually be who God is asking you to be in this moment of history. We have to pray. All of that to say, you have to pray. Man, you just took however long you took to tell me that I need to pray. You need to pray. And you have to let prayer become your resource. It's been overdue to put down all of the other tools and tricks. It's time to pray. We fast and pray. That's our secret sauce. We fast and pray. That's our lifeline. We fast and pray because this gives us the necessary grace and then the necessary strength. We fast and pray. Daniel knew what they wrote into public policy, and he went home and prayed. I'm praying and believing that God is going to get what he wants. And I know that he will. I don't say that speculatively. I'm talking about out of you. I know that he's going to get it overall. He's going to get it overall. What we are talking about, he is going to produce it in the lives of those that belong to him. The question is whether or not we will yield and whether our lives will be included with what it is that he is producing on the inside of those that are responding to the invitation of the hour the way that God has issued his invitation. But he is going to get it. And there are going to be a powerful people that rise. Daniel went home and prayed. And I'm praying that this is what we would do. And so that's the way I'm going to close. And that's the way I'm going to pray for you. I'm going to pray that you would begin to pray. And that you would then maybe begin or continue to receive grace to know the voice of God outside of your own personal interests, your own self-interests. And that there would then be grace in that place to make the decisions, posture your life, and in a public way, bear the consequences of what you know the voice of God may be speaking to you. This is something that's only going to be possible by the Spirit. And if the Spirit doesn't actually do it and make it real and give us grace, then again, we don't have a shot at actually accomplishing this in our own strength. So Lord, I pray that as we close our time together, that you would tug on the hearts of your people. That by your Spirit, you would begin to tug on our hearts. And speak to us, Lord. Speak to us about all of the other places that we turn to. All of the other things that we do. All of the other resources and crutches and tools that we know how to employ or go to whenever times get tough and we really need to make something happen, or we've got to be able to turn the table or turn the tide or produce a different outcome. Lord, I'm praying, speak to us. Expose these things. Expose these things in our heart. All of our crutches. All of our go-tos. Expose these things in our heart. And I'm asking you, Lord, in places where prayer has been our last resort, it's been the last ditch effort, the statement that's been associated with our lives of, well, I guess now we have to pray. I'm asking you, Lord, expose every place in our hearts that's refused to be dependent upon prayer. Expose every space that is still alive on the inside that longs to be able to do something else or go somewhere else than to the secret place. Lord, I'm praying that all of our historical tendencies, where we've just known to do other things, and in some ways it's always seemed to work, expose us, Lord. Expose us graciously, tenderly, mercifully, and awaken your people in this hour and drive them to the place of prayer. Thank you for the pressure that is pushing us to pray. Thank you for the pain that is pushing us into the secret place. Thank you for the proposed consequences that have brought us to the end of our own intellectual abilities to reason out what's best for us in this hour of history, to where now our prayer life has become vibrant, but it's because we've run out of resources. Now our secret place is on fire, but it's because we don't know what else to do. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. I pray that you would get what you want out of your people in this season. May we become a praying people. And may you have your way. Rule in our hearts, King Jesus. Govern over our lives and guide us by your voice. We have to know you, and we long to know what you are saying. Help us, Lord. And may we do no thing outside of what we know you are saying. Because Jesus, you said it best. You can do no thing apart from me. You can do nothing, and you can do a lot of nothing apart from me. We don't want to be apart from you, Lord, in this season. We don't want to be outside of the boundaries of your voice. We can still love you and be separate from your voice. We can still love you and not be yielding to what it is that we know that you're saying. We can claim to love you and still not subject ourselves to the wisdom of the voice of the Spirit in this hour of history. But Lord, you said it best. Those who love me will be those who obey me, because my sheep know my voice. And another voice, or the voice of a stranger, you said, that those that belong to you will not be ruled by the voice of a stranger. They won't be moved by another voice. For my sheep know my voice, and another they will not follow. Lord, help us to sort through all of the voices and determine what's yours and determine what's another. And then I pray, give grace, King Jesus. Give grace for us to yield to your voice. Give grace for what we know that's happening privately, personally, intimately in the secret place. Give grace, King Jesus, I pray. And help us not just to be a prayerful people, but help us to actually posture our lives in the instructions we are receiving in the place of prayer, to posture our lives to, yes, be a prayerful people that lead us to be a people that will posture our lives according to what you're saying.